The one where Australia just Australia'd everyone else at the Nations Cup. Coming up, why the main character energy again from Australia as we reflect on them heading back home, flying with some extra luggage. Someone who always gives us an upgrade energy is Tamsin Greenway, ready to debrief everything. We have had so many questions across social media, Instagram and X. Thank you to everyone that's got in touch. We'll try and get through the main majority of the questions that repeated throughout. Making sense? Hopefully we will in just a bit. Right, I'll start simple, Tamsin. Are Australia 20 goals better than England?
Well, there's a question, isn't there? Are they 20 goals better? Well, they were at the weekend. Are they? No, I'm not sure it's a fair reflection of how our squad, the Roses, have been building and how they can perform. But it's not just as straightforward as an individual game. There are so many layers to this, from the concept of us technically, tactically, what we're putting out, the combinations we're playing, the coaching styles, so how we like to interchange a lot of players, to the work that's gone on in the background. You know, there's so much more than that. But yeah, they smashed us at the weekend, and we've just got to accept that. But we've actually got to start recognising some of these patterns and why we are seemingly on this roller coaster of a ride.
I think that's all your questions answered. Thank you and good night. It's not. We're going to get to it, and we'll get to England properly, but we're going to start with Australia. That was the easy question. Now on to the hard stuff. Are winners of the 2024 Nations Cup, beating England 69-49 to take the trophy in Leeds. Let's hear from Australia coach Stacy Minkovich.
Stacey, when you put a side together, you talk about a game plan. You always hope they'll execute it. Did you ever imagine they'd do it quite so well today?
I knew that we were really focused on the hard work. I think they pride themselves in it. We knew it's hard to win here, it's hard to win international netball, and that's been our theme for this game. And I thought they came out of the blocks hard, and you know, we built momentum, but everyone kept supporting each other, and then you know, to be able to inject the changes and keep winning the fourth quarter was, you know, it's really pleasing.
Talking about those changes, it was utterly seamless. You've obviously built such a strong culture and identity with this group of players that you just have to check sometimes who's playing where, because everybody seems to be buying into what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and to be honest, that's led by Lizzie and the girls. You know, they're a real squad mentality. We've got players back home that when they come in, they train exceptionally hard. So everything builds and pushes the team that actually steps out on the court, and it's something that they've really grasped hold of and they own.
Can you get better? Where do you get better? Just terrify us all.
Oh, there's definitely room for improvement across, but I think right here, right now, I just want to embrace what they've been able to achieve. It's a great way to start the season, and we'll go back and see where we need to go.
Definitely more to come from Australia. Do you see that? Do you see more to come?
Well, I think just how they've evolved over the past few years, and especially under the leadership of Stacy Minkovich, we've seen so many different styles of play, especially defensively. So they went into a box defence against England yesterday, a box defence, and were winning ball offers comfortably. They're doing so much more. The early exits from Garbin, bringing Dwyer. You know, I was a bit eyebrows raised when I saw Dwyer down on the team sheet and how she was going to be across this Nations Cup. She was brilliant. I think they've been frightening. I think, you know, the other nations are going to have to take note of what they're trying to achieve. And it just full credit to Stacey and her forward-thinking approach, and actually how she wants to get this team to keep moving forward, because the game has changed over the last few years, and she's been brilliant in shifting that Aussie group.
Is it like that friend you have at school who can, you know, top of the class in every subject, can also run the 100 metres in 2.3 seconds, brilliant swimmer, bakes like a goddess, but then when they hit a certain age, it all falls apart? Is that what we've got to hope for Australia?
Is that what we're clinging on to right now?
Yeah.
It's going to take a while. Look, they've set the benchmark, haven't they? And I think one of the big parts about the Australia game is they're consistently good across the board, and when they impact with purpose. There's so many historical reasons around that. That doesn't mean they're untouchable. And actually, it's a challenge. It should be seen as a challenge to all the other nations that they're here, but how are we going to get there and then overtake them and do that consistently well? That's going to take some time. But as I said, it's not impossible.
We had a question in from JD who was saying, Australia have the best league, including the best British players. Therefore, shouldn't we just concentrate on making our league better? Is a super shot part of that? Not now, JD. Read the room is kind of what I'd say to that. Wouldn't you?
Look, we're trying to improve our league, and that's what I'm saying. This has got so many layers to it, and this league will change. The Super League is going to go professional. Whether we bring in different rules, the Super Shot will certainly help the Australian players, but that's another time. But yeah, that's got to be our benchmark. That's what we want to be pushing for, right? And I'm still a real advocate of having 3 or 4 professional leagues across the world, in Aussie, in New Zealand, in South Africa, with us, so these players can go and filter and play against different players and different coaching styles and enjoy that world experience of what playing professional sports is all about. But again, that's a time frame, isn't it? In the immediate, what are we going to do about that? Because we're not just going to overnight suddenly switch and build these bridges and close those gaps instantly.
Well done, Australia. Most impressive. Right, we're doing this in ranking order. So England, the beaten finalists next. Here's coach Jess Thirlby.
Jess, really tough day at the office. We're asking ourselves, how did a team last weekend that only lost by 2 lose by 20 today?
Yeah, we didn't put into play the things that we'd spoken about. I think there's a real clarity of those easy wins that we could have put in place. And I thought we started the game lovely. I thought there was quite a decent feel in the team, nice confidence. But in those moments today where they broke us, I think you saw a little bit of grit. We stayed within touching distance. I think going into half time, it was such a shame we let that slip. So our responses today weren't at the level they need to be against a team like that.
We heard you at quarter 1 and quarter 3. We heard the frustration. Game plan, guys, game plan. Why didn't that game plan work out there today? And where did the breakdown come?
Look, I think individual errors. You know, we had dead ball time where it was in our advantage. Goal defences pulled out of play, we didn't make smart choices, then we didn't score off it. You know, those are moments where it should be a shoo-in that we get it in on a 2v1 in the circle. So that tells us something about we're not quite there in terms of our game smarts against a very smart team. So I think we were outscored at times today and really respect what Australia did. But I loved the fight back. I think we always do that, but the margin just got too big, too quick.
You wanted to know where you are. Do you? And where's the biggest work-ons?
Yeah, I think I do. Like, we know where we are. You know, we know we can compete. We know we're capable, but we can't. We get punished in those moments, and that rightly so. You know, like we have to be smarter, and that's where we're at. But I'm super proud that we've put ourselves in this position because it keeps telling us stuff that we need to know, and we've got 3 years to keep building on that.
There's been so many comments, as you would imagine. Not all favourable to what happened across the series, but still lots of love for the young players coming through for England. And I know out of those questions, if you've managed to read them all, Tamsin, we do have a look at them all. We can't answer them all, so I'll get on with it. What went wrong?
Oh, really? Look, I think in isolation in that game, what went wrong? I don't think we started with the right lineup, and I've said this before. I'm a huge Fumi fan, so this is not against her at all. I think she's brilliant. She's world class. She needs to be in our squad. But starting her at wing defence, which is not a preferred position, against the best wing attack in the world at times, was a mistake. And it was all Fumi's attributes were used against her by Liz Watson. You would expect that from a player with 84 caps to a player with 25, from a player playing in her first choice position to a player playing in a second choice position. And it didn't work. And it opened up the space so much. I think then there was a catalyst of things that happened after that. Australia were confident at that point. Did we go too early with the changes? Again, in hindsight, it's really easy to discuss and dissect. I would say we probably only needed to change that wing defence position and go back to what had been our favoured strongest lineup throughout the competition. We didn't. We made some other changes, and from that, it spiralled. However, what I will say, there's got to be lessons learned from the week before. And, you know, I was one of those people. We came away from that game buzzing when England nearly beat Australia. But nearly. They didn't beat Australia the weekend before. And they played out of their skin. Balls spraying around. Stuff that had no right to land against Courtney Bruce. You know, it just didn't. And yet we did it. And we consistently did it. Can you always play at that level? Absolutely not. It's impossible to do that. And so what I think we need to find is this consistent level ground that Australia always seemed to have. The warning signs were there. Australia had the opportunity to put us to bed the week before. They didn't do it. They went 9 up. They sprayed a couple of balls away, which was uncharacteristic, and they let England get a sniff. And then there were a few other things that happened. Sophie Garbin's one shot she missed was at a critical time. So, I mean, as a coach, when I dissect that, you have to understand where this team's at. So are we at a stage yet where we're going to consistently beat the Aussies? No, we're not. should we have lost by 20 goals? No, we shouldn't. But we've got to start unpicking the reasons behind this.
There's a lot in what you just talked about, and you mentioned the difference between the first and then the second meeting with Australia. Amy asks, do you think the lack of high-level exposure in these moments for the new breed showed in that final today? And I would add that into, do you think this England setup at the moment can handle tournaments? Like, can they do it in one, but not over a series against the same team, or meeting them for a second time against the same team? And how do you shift that to make sure that those players that aren't exposed to that get that exposure?
Again, this is hard, isn't it? And it comes to a wider aspect. Like I would argue that all the players that have stepped out there have had high level experience at some point in the last sort of 18 months. Whether they've had long enough out there is a whole different story. I think what we've got to decide on is just when Aussie make changes, they don't change their whole game plan. They change personnel out there. So we saw it with Aussie, right? When they brought Donnell Wallum in, it was a completely different style for them. And although Donnell is quality and she scored 31 out of 33 and she was brilliant, it wasn't as good as when you have Garvin or Conan in there, because their style is exit, rotation, movement, and that's what everyone's comfortable with, and that's what they're doing majority of time at the training ground, right? So I think England, for me at the moment, it's not about whether those players can handle those pressures. I think we've almost got a lot of styles going on, and we need to start cementing what is ours. So, we brought Sasha Glasgow on. Sasha Glasgow has played in the SSN. Like, she's a brilliant player. She plays against Courtney Bruce all the time. She was at the same club as her, but she didn't shine in this test. And through the other games, we hadn't seen her at all. So the argument for me is not whether Sasha Glasgow can handle the pressure. It's what exposure should we have given her up to that point, and was it the right change at the right time? And just because she is doing it in training, can the whole group adapt to a new style of play? I think that's a big ask when you're in those kind of games. So it's not necessarily the individual and their exposure. It's more about the moments and what is our style, what is our identity, because that is going to matter across a tournament. Because when you play a tournament, you're playing a Uganda, and then you're playing the Kiwis, and then you're playing the Aussies, and they all play differently. But your game plan has to remain the same in terms of how you play, and then you tweak a tactic here to play the Kiwi zone, and then you tweak a tactic here to isolate a Courtney Bruce or a Liz Watson, and that I'm not sure we're there yet.
When Jess Thirlby then says after, and we heard during some of the talks throughout, that the players weren't fulfilling that game plan, how do you then rectify that with the players? How do you balance that, coach, players, not playing the blame game in that situation, but that so everyone does understand and everyone does fulfill what you want them to?
Yeah, well, again, it was a really tough ask and a turnaround. They'd had that huge game up against the Kiwis, which was tactically very different, and Thirlby nailed the tactics against the Silver Ferns. The especially attack end, the way they were pulling the middle and the wide, and everyone was very clear on the game plan. 24 hours later, you've got to back that up against Australia, who are playing very different style of netball, and all you'd have had is an opportunity to talk about it and watch video. So there is an element of your players aren't always going to do what you want them to do, and that's hard, and that's frustrating at times as a coach. So I think this is where it comes back to that consistency, that we know our play and we have those tweaks. And I think that's why at the minute, and you've seen it with all the nations really, that they match up better against different opposition in different moments. So it's a really tricky one. I don't think there should ever be a blame game. And I think the way Thirlby works with their players is very much they're allowed to have an opinion and give thinking play. You heard that with some of her team talks. She challenged Nat on what Nat Metcalf had said to her the day before about why things weren't opening up. And it's just, again, a style of coaching, and it's something that the players have got to take ownership of. If the game plan was there and they weren't executing it, then that's on them on that day. But what it is on is the coaches to make sure that they can execute that, and what have they done behind the scenes. So it becomes a joint approach. And in the heat of the moment, it's a really tough call because everyone feels the pressure.
We heard some words in the heat of the moment from various teams throughout the tournament. Right, we're going to play a game. Do you want to play a game? I know you love games. Look at that face. Who doesn't love a game? Let's play fantasy netball, Tamsin Greenway. If you take availability, right, anyone. You can have the pick of anyone, and you take your best team from Australia squad and your best team squad from England. Are they 20 goals apart?
No, absolutely not. But I think one of the challenges we've had, and the way we're approaching things at the moment, I love the stats. I was doing some stats, and after the Commonwealth Games, through to the World Cup, and then out the other side. Take the World Cup out of it. We've had, in 15 months, we've had 20 tests. Yeah, so we've had Nations Cup, we played Uganda, we played Australia, we played New Zealand, we played South Africa. We've had those opportunities. 20 tests. In those 20 tests, we've had 32 different players. Now, look, not every player is taken to the court. Ella Bowen and Emma Thacker went out to New Zealand, they didn't play. But you still put them in the squad. That's almost 3 different squads. It's almost 3 different squads of 12 that we've taken across 15 months. And that's a lot. That is a lot. And when you start backing that up as well, you look at how many players have played in position. Like, and give you keepers already. We've tried 6 keepers in that 15 months. Jiva was still in there at some points. We've had Fran in there, we've had Hallie, we've had Raz, we've had Jada, we've had Alice Harvey. 6 keepers in 15 months. And at some point, I feel we've got to condense that a little bit. So when you ask me that question, do we have those players? Yes, we do. We might have a 7 today, but we've also had 5 to 8 ticking along in the background that are working and aiming and building to make sure that they're consistent players as well. And yeah, when I actually looked through that, I was like, that is a lot. That is a lot of opportunity for different people, and not enough opportunity for people like Fumi to develop their wing defence game internationally.
I mean, the clue is in some of the positions, isn't it? She's a keeper. Anyway, Harry wants to know, Australia over the international series have committed a smaller squad of 17. Do England need to commit to a core 17-18, which is what you've just been saying, persist with them going forward to 2027? A few comments like that too. So this is your bit of homework. I want to know your best squad, Tamsin. Who's the best 12? Who would challenge Australia going forward? You can think about that and what the next year and 4 years will look like, because we'll talk third place next. New Zealand beating Uganda 62-57. Let's hear from both coaches.
You got there in the end, but it was a little bit, I guess, more painful than you'd have hoped for.
Oh God, yeah, it was sometimes like going to the dentist sometimes, but hey, we came out with the win once again. With this current group, the only way that we can learn is on the job. Some really good moments, but on their opposite, some areas that we really need to tidy up on.
How much has this group of inexperienced players grown over the last couple of weeks? There's nothing like being able to get your hands on them away from home and face some really tough opposition.
Yeah, look, massively. I think, for our game yesterday against England, we're 150 least caps in England and we pushed it to the wire. Really pleased. Our ability to back up from one game to another is still a bit of work on, and our ability to close the door when we need to is still a work on. But I can be really proud about those ones who made their debut, and there's quite a few in our team who have done that over this tournament.
So what next for you, Nolene? Come on, tell us.
Yeah, I know, it's a big decision that's got to be made. I'll go home.
Have you made it yet in your mind?
No, I haven't actually. Truly, I haven't made it. Was making to get this tournament over and done with. I'm really glad that I'm at this space now that I can really decide, but also talk to Netball New Zealand as to what's required. We go through the review process, and that will help me decide what that next step's going to look like.
How hard would it be, though, to say goodbye to a group of players at the beginning of a cycle? You've clearly got so much talent there.
I know. That's the craziest thing, You're so close. And I always believe, though, I'm only a guardian of this position. I've been a silver fern myself. I don't own it. And I will always do what's right, I think, for the team and also our organisation. So we'll go into the process in saying that really proud about what we have, the depth that's coming through. I feel we're quite nicely set for a couple of cycles as well. So we'll see what the next step brings.
Once again, you push New Zealand very, very close.
Yeah, but I'm just disappointed because we had them where I wanted them to be. But some silly mistakes here and there during the last minute, giving the ball away. It has costed us this game. But otherwise, we have a very good game, and being this is our first tournament with such big teams, I think the guys have performed very well.
I wanted to ask you finally what it's been like to be here as a group, to play this tournament, how much you take away, everybody who's part of this squad, because you've had exposure to teams you wouldn't ordinarily get outside of a World Cup or a Con Games.
Yeah, in fact, we have gained a lot and we have learnt a lot because apart from being in the World Cup last time, we never played some of these teams physically. But this time around we have played and we have learned how they are playing, and when we go back home I think we are going to work on that and looking at the individual countries, the way they play, and then we shall come up with a better strategy so that we beat them next time.
Positives for New Zealand. Debutantes, big tick. Grace Nweke, 21 years old and has now passed 1,000 goals in 31 games. Have we seen the gear shift in New Zealand? So when we talk about what they want to get out of this, have they got enough out of this to think, right, now heading over this cycle, we're going to be all right, we'll be up there in those finals with Australia?
Yeah, I think one of the areas I was talking about is now they've got Grace Nweke, you know, that attack end is always going to thrive. She's pretty unstoppable and only going to get better. You know, she got 50 goals against Uganda. I mean, it's just absurd. And what I liked is Nolene was still developing that attack end. So going, well, no, you can't just whack it in from everywhere, guys. You're going to have to work this ball. And Malasala really grew into that game. Georgia Heffernan got some time out there, a goal attack as well. So there's definitely room for improvement at that end, and I can see what they're building towards. Down the other end, I think there are question marks about their defence and how they're going to play moving forward.
Ali asks that. Ali on social, what's going wrong in the New Zealand defensive end? These aren't inexperienced players, but they aren't shutting teams down and picking up ball like they used to. Sorry, Carline.
No, well, and that's a perfect comment, right? Because the game changes. Just like the Aussies cannot continuously do one-on-one now, and they've had to shift into a sort of box-style defence. New Zealand are going to have to adapt their zone as well. But it's for different teams, right? So when they played England, they only lost by 1 goal. They actually had 13 games. They had more games than England did in that game. When they played Uganda in the third, fourth playoff, they had five games. So it's the styles as well. It's who they're playing against and how that matches up. So the zone for me can stay, but it has to be tweaked. It has to be adapted. And that might be a personnel change, or it might be a shift in sitting higher or sitting narrower or actually setting up what ball they go for. I don't think one team anymore in the world can sit with one tactic and expect to be at the top. And you've seen that from Australia. And it's a bit like Uganda, right? Their style of playing possession netball is not seen in lots of other parts of the world, and they do it exceptionally well, but they're going to have to grow from that because it's still not getting them over the line. And I think that's where the growth needs to come from the Kiwis now. They've got this attack end that's going to be frightening. And remember, Maddie Gordon didn't play in those last couple of games either. She'll be added back in. They've also got some key players sitting at home. Ekanazio didn't come on this tour. There was a couple of other players that didn't hit the fitness results, so they didn't come on this tour. So they've got players to add in. They've done enough work with the new players coming through, but they now need to refine some things tactically, and they've got time to do that.
Did you say Uganda? Because many people will be sat there watching off the court, the debrief, Nations Cup, thinking, where is the love? I'm not singing, I just did. But there's been loads of love for Uganda across social media. Every single message has just been about what a brilliant addition to the Nations Cup. Wonderful combinations. That first time test against Australia, new stars too. So if we've got big ticks against Australia, Uganda, the real love, as I say, interest affair in this relationship coming out the Nations Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. And what an opportunity for them to go at the top teams, and what a huge step forward for World Netball as well. I was really impressed. I was impressed with Mary Chollock. I thought she was outstanding. And again, the free range she was given in this squad to allow her to exit the circle, to play a different style to what we're used to at Loughborough Lightning, and how invaluable that was for that side. The growth in defence end was impressive. So I've raved about players like Kadondi and Mohammed, who we're going to see in the Super League. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. The frightening thing about Uganda is just imagine what they could become. So they've got their own individual style of play. Talked about possession netball. In defence, they sit still very much on a one-on-one. They will start to drop and go into a double in the circle. But there's more to come from that. There's so much more to come. And their exposure and they're evolving in the game will happen by playing these top nations to go, oh, what were Australia doing and what can we take from that? And, well, what did New Zealand do? And just how they matched up against people. Like, they never let England or New Zealand get away from them at all. They were a bit exposed against Australia. Not really surprised with that, though, just because Australia is so structured. But they would have learnt loads. And, you know, it's another step up for the African nations. And rightly so. You know, we've got to stop ignoring these other nations and let them into the competitions to play and improve and take world netball forward. We need more than the top 3 or 4 competing, and we're getting that now. And how exciting is that for our sport?
Well, it sounds like you're talking about the future, and we should discuss the future for the competition. This evolution from the Quad Series into the Nations Cup, Uganda coming in. We do not know what's happening with the Commonwealth Games yet, but netball needs a big tournament in between the start of the cycle and the end being the World Cup, if you're thinking that way. Every 2 years, we need a big tournament, right? Yeah. Would you expand the Nations Cup? Would you bring more teams in?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, remember, we haven't even got Jamaica and South Africa here. Imagine sprinkling them into this. I think there's massive scope for some of the other African nations to be exposed in this as well, and then starting to look at the home nations. You know, Wales got a Test Series win against Uganda when they first arrived in the country before they headed into the Nations Cup. Unless you start giving these teams the opportunities, you will not see the growth of the game as quickly as we want. So I absolutely believe this is the right way forward. Look at the work that Australia and New Zealand are doing with teams like Tonga. I mean, it needs to happen for a game. It needs to happen for the survival of the sport, and for the excitement of the fans. And yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. Like, we need to be starting to be creative about what is going to keep fan engagement, how the game progresses, and keep exposing everyone to different ways of playing the netball game, because long gone is the cut and drive, one-on-one type of play that we've seen for years. There's so many other players out there that play different ways, that play incredible ways of netball.
Tamsin Greenway, welcome to Mastermind. Your specialist subject is netball. Are you ready to answer some more questions?
Yes.
Thank you to everyone that's got in touch using the hashtag #OffTheCourt and replying to Tamsin on social media. I'll try and give you a flavour of them. So lots you've covered already, but about various positions. Talk about how wing attack, wing defence, where you're stood on that at the moment. Back to that original question I asked you about the sort of 12 that you would take, or your starting 7, however many we're committing to for squads going forward. Do you know now who the best players are, and who are they for England in those positions?
I think we've got a 9 who are in. I think the 3 you've got to decide on are in those key areas of the next player through. So for example, you're going to take a Sasha, a Ellen, and a Helen, right? So who's your 4th shooter in that? Do you want to go, right, let's bring George Fisher back into the mould when she's back fully fit on the court? She's going to give us something completely different. But like I said about the Donnell Wallen thing, have we got time to do that? Is she the right person in? Or do you go, right, we go with Berry Neal, but then you've got 4 very similar shooters. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But then you've got to develop the tactics.
What would you do?
I would go different, because I like that. But I actually think there's massive reasonings behind why you'd go the same. So that's the first thing. I think you've got your 3 mid-quarters, which are your Nat, your Amy, and your Imo. They're in for me. You got to find another wing attack, and preferably another centre wing attack. I think that's where England have been lacking. And if I was coming through the programme now, I was a mid-quarter, I'd be making myself a centre wing attack, because they're just so scarce. And look at what Paige Hadley has done at Australia. Like, that's the kind of position you need. So I think we need to reevaluate who that's going to be. Personally, I would go with someone like Alyssa Scholes now and just go, I'm going to go young. I've got those 3 that can do that. I'd go there. And then defensively, your Fran, your Fumi, your Raz. And again, it comes down to that 4th keeper position. Would you persist with someone like Alice Harvey, who gives you something completely different, or do you bring Jada into the squad? I know what all the fans would say. They'd say bring Jada. I'm just saying it's a very small unit. And again, it's the very same style. That might be okay. I would be inclined to go something a little bit different. But yeah, it's a tough call.
Is it me?
Barker, you're in. But I think this is where it's really important, right? You know, the end goal from all the coaches and all the teams is to win. How you get there is up to you. And I think this is what we've got to take reality on. And at the moment, England aren't following the same pathways in Australia. You know, Australia have decided that this is how they're going to get there and that's what they're going to do. And that comes to everything, the choice of the players they have, the competition they have, the style of play, all of that kind of stuff. England are not doing it the conventional way. They aren't. They're not consistently picking squads. They're giving loads of opportunities to people. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It does mean we're on a roller coaster, but we might still get there. And I think that's what we have to understand. We don't actually know the outcome, but we do know that it can be quite frustrating at times because we have so close and then we have so far. But hey, maybe that's just the journey we're on and maybe that's okay.
That sort of covers off some of the criticism that's been levelled at the current coaching setup and where they're going. Is it, again, you know, there was lots of praise for some of the interviews and the comments that we heard after that first weekend. Going forward now, is it about a bit more confidence in where this team's going, what they're trying to do, a bit more exposure in that? Or do you just trust the process and off you go? It's now being accountable when the medals come round.
Yeah, I think you have to trust the process. Look, you can be the best coach technically and tactically in the world, but if you don't fit into the organisation and the way that they want to get to that end goal, then it makes no difference. You look around the world, it took Nolene years to get that coaching job. There was so many critics about Stacy Minkovich taking that role. This is not as straightforward as, oh, you're great, so you'll go into there. Like, we've got a regime in place at the moment that is doing it their way, and that's absolutely fine. I think at this point now, you have to trust that those people have to fit into the organisation, the style and the way that they want to go about this, and that is very much what they're doing. They've talked about exposing players. They are certainly doing that. We've had results, and we've had close games, and we're getting fan engagement. I just think it's too soon to start pulling that card. I think you've got to start trusting what's going on behind the scenes, and we'll see whether we get there. The reality is, you could do everything right and you could still come second at the World Cup, because there are another 6 nations that are also trying to get there, and you do have to kind of be mindful of that.
Well, unsurprisingly, you've done well on your specialist subject. Now for general knowledge. Are you ready? No, we're not going to do that. Tamsin Greenway, as always, a pleasure. We are reading all the comments. We will be back for another Off the Court soon, so do keep them coming, and maybe we'll just do one entirely made of your questions as well. So use the hashtag Off the Court. And the Netball Super League is back. Season opener, the 17th of February. Until then, what's 20 goals amongst friends, right?
Sky Sports. Feel it all.